Cancım çeker misin Mahmut'cum?
Oynat Uğur'cum.
Burası Nikola Tesla Müzesi. Ama 10 kişi, yani şöyle internette 500 dinar yazıyor. 10 kişi ve artı olunca 300 dinara düşüyormuş. O yüzden şu an Levent'le Gizem'i bekliyoruz. Onlar geldiğinde beraber gireceğiz buraya.
10 kişi olsa indirim
Nikola
yapacağız.
Tesla Müzesi'ni gezeceğiz.
İçeride.
Belgeseli kaçırdık. Hakikaten saat 12'de tekrardan belgesel ve deneyler var. Biz o saate kadar bir 20 dakikamız falan var. Önce müzeye gezip daha sonrasında şeyler izleyeceğiz.
From time to time, at rare moments, the great spirit of invention descends to Earth to reveal a secret which will advance humanity. He selects the most suitable, the most deserving, and whispers the secret in their ear. Like a flash of light, the precious knowledge appears. Grasping the hidden meaning, the lucky recipient sees a magic change. There's a new world before his enraptured eyes, one he barely recognizes as a semblance of the old. This is not a passing illusion, the mere play of a vivid imagination, or a phantom of mist that will dissolve away. The marvels he sees, as remote in time as they appear to be, will come to pass. He knows it. There's not a shadow of doubt in his mind. He feels it in every fiber of his body. It is a great idea. Nikola Tesla was born at midnight between June 9 and 10, 1856, in the village of Smiljan in Liga, the military frontier area in the Austrian Empire. In many interviews he later gave as a renowned inventor in the USA, he described a childhood full of happiness, spent playing in the company of his large family, already showing his future genius. His father, Milutin, was parish priest of the Orthodox Church of Saints Peter and Paul in Smiljan. According to Nikola Tesla himself, he was a true philosopher, a poet and writer with a remarkable memory. For one of his sermons, he was honored by the Austrian Emperor Franz Joseph. He also left a wonderful description of a shower of meteors near Smiljan on July 12, 1855, the year before Nikola was born. In some way, this heralded the birth of his son, the genius. Tesla's mother, Juka, of whom no portrait survives, was from one of the oldest and most respected Serbian families in Lika. Her celebrated son Nikola later wrote that his mother, although illiterate, was a genius with great intuition. She had a special gift for invention and skilled fingers with which she wove the most beautiful patterns. Her brother, Nikola's uncle, the future Bishop Nikolai, was highly skilled at making home decorative pieces of wood and iron. He was also a specialist in bookbinding. The documentary records of Tesla's maternal ancestors, the Budisavljević family, are especially interesting. The Budisavljevićes were a family of many prominent Orthodox Church priests and also many military officers. During the 18th and 19th centuries, two members of the Budisavljević family were awarded noble titles by the Austrian Empire for their military achievements. They were raised in a spirit of war and courage, with a military understanding of humor, characteristics which were passed down from generation to generation. To understand Tesla's genuine and unusual personality, it's important to bear in mind the trio of important influences on his life: the culture and value system imbued by his family, his education in European scientific institutions, and the pragmatic American environment which not only allowed him to implement his revolutionary inventions from an early age, but also to continue with his complicated and expensive experiments. Between 1873 and 1880, Tesla studied engineering at the Graz University of Technology and the Charles University in Prague. This was the pioneering era for the science of electricity, and it was during Tesla's second year at Graz that he first saw the Gramme dynamo producing direct current, along with a noisy shower of sparks, and later working as a motor. Boldly, he stood and told Professor Peschel that he believed it was possible to make a more efficient machine which would work with alternating current. Despite the criticism of his teacher and the explanation that alternating current motors were impossible, in the years that followed, Tesla persisted in thinking about this problem, trusting his intuition. During this time, he developed an ingenious method of invention. This was based on the unusual ability of visualizing for himself a three-dimensional moving image of something he had imagined while awake and conscious. These images were so realistic and precise that he found drawings, measurements, and experiments were unnecessary. In 1882, Tesla was in Budapest, where his uncle, Pia Mandic, helped him find employment in Tivada Puskas's telephone exchange. He soon showed his talent, producing his first unpatented invention, an amplifying telephone for the transmission of live music. There, in a park in Budapest, at sunset one February afternoon, walking with his friend Szigeti and reciting verses from Goethe's Faust, Tesla found what he had sought for 5 years. The elusive solution for an alternating current motor sprang into his mind. Using a stick, he was able to draw in the sand plans for the invention which was to make him famous. Rotating magnetic fields created by an alternating current. Over the following 2 years, while working in a branch of Edison's company in Paris and Strasbourg, Tesla completed his visualization to the end of the experiment and made the first working models. He even made his first attempt to commercialize his motor. But at that time, it was difficult to persuade European entrepreneurs to accept new ideas. And, at his supervisor's urging, he finally decided to leave Paris and try his luck in America. Tesla arrived in America in 1884 on the RMSS City of Richmond with 4 cents to his name, a few songs and calculations for a flying machine. In his pocket, he had one more valuable letter, one of recommendation from Charles Batchelor to Thomas Edison. In it, Batchelor wrote, I know two great men and you are one of them. The other is this young man. Tesla's first job was to improve Edison's dynamos, and he worked at this job with the real passion and commitment of a young man who had just one goal: to interest Edison in inventions in the area of alternating currents. But the goals and methods of the two inventors were too far from each other, and it was inevitable that they would go their separate ways. It didn't take long for Tesla to find investors for his revolutionary invention. With the help of lawyer Charles Peck, he established his own laboratory in Liberty Street, New York in 1887. There, he finally made true prototypes of the first induction motors and applied for patent protection for them. After giving a brilliant lecture at the American Society of Electrical Engineers, Tesla contacted George Westinghouse, owner and founder of the company which bears his name. Westinghouse decided to buy the patent for Tesla's system for the production, transmission, and use of polyphase alternating currents. This was a dream come true for Tesla, but also the beginning of new temptations. Tesla found himself in the middle of a ruthless fight between Edison and Westinghouse for market dominance. In popular science, this was known as the War of the Currents. Edison tried in vain to prove the value of direct current. The benefits of Tesla's alternating current system quickly became obvious, especially for the transmission of electricity over long distances. When Westinghouse used Tesla's system to light the World Exhibition in Chicago in 1893, a decisive blow was struck to the support of the direct current. The exhibition opened in May 1903 with spectacular light shows and a demonstration of the complete transmission system for alternating current. This removed the last hurdle to its universal adoption. The Chicago success helped Westinghouse to obtain a contract to build a hydroelectric power plant at the Niagara Falls. This historic event was perhaps the most significant step towards creating a second industrial revolution. Of the 13 patents used in building the Niagara power system, 9 belonged to Tesla. Suddenly, Tesla was very famous. His inventions, discoveries, and visions were widely accepted by the scientific community, both at home and abroad. They were published in scientific magazines, daily and weekly newspapers, and in highly credible literary and intellectual reviews. During the last decade of the 19th century, Tesla became a superstar, a celebrity, and a very important person in New York's upper echelons. Prestigious American and European universities were falling over themselves to present him with medals and honors. After a lecture to the Royal Society in London in 1892, Tesla was advised by leading English scientists to concentrate his enormous creative energy on one problem. More and more, Tesla focused on the problem of meeting humanity's energy needs. From May 1899 until January 1900, Tesla stayed in Colorado Springs. There, in an unattractive timber laboratory, he undertook fascinating experiments with an oscillating transformer of 12 million volts and discovered resonant frequencies of the Earth, which established stationary waves. He believed he had found a mechanism which would transmit energy and information around the world. Later, writing to his most important sponsor, J.P. Morgan, he said, "I have found the new philosopher's stone. My discovery is so revolutionary that it will impact almost all social values and relations." On his return to New York in January 1900, Tesla published spectacular photographs from Colorado as part of a visionary article about the future of the global society entitled "The Problem of Increasing Human Energy." Soon after this, financed by J.P. Morgan, he began to build a laboratory, the famous tower in Shoreham, Long Island, close to New York. The building, 60 meters tall, which he named the Increasing Transmitter because of its geometry, mechanical and electrical features, was a tower which corresponded to characteristics of the Earth and represented a similarly tied resonating system. He intended this system to support wireless emission and transmission of information and energy to any point on the Earth. But his plans were to come to naught. J.P. Morgan suddenly withdrew all his funds and refused to finance any further work by Tesla. It seems that the final purpose of Tesla's system was unacceptable, and that the whole project was ahead of its time. Tesla was shocked. In 1908, Tesla refocused his work on machine engineering and delivered a number of new inventions such as turbo machines and blades. He wanted to earn enough money to finance construction of his world wireless system himself. Thanks to business problems and an unreasonable approach, many of his ideas and projects were not completed, and today they remain as a point of interest for many engineers and researchers. This was a period when Tesla took critical aim at the developing trends of the contemporary world and presented many projections of the possible consequences of a number of issues. During the 1920s, he preached about the need to conserve the energy which humanity was consuming profligately, the necessity to find new alternative and renewable sources of energy, and the inevitability of moderating consumption. He promoted a culture of human values, a serious education which would balance the acquisition of skills with the nurturing of ideals. After the beginning of the Great Depression in 1929, he closed his laboratories and agencies and gave up on his efforts to develop a business based on the commercialization of his own discoveries. In his last years, he was notable for giving sensational interviews in which he announced a new dynamic theory of gravity, machines to use energy from the environment, and a new type of defensive weapon. This last sparked the interest of American, German, British, and Soviet intelligence agencies. After signing a contract to protect the Soviet Union from air attacks by constructing what he called a death ray, he had a suspicious traffic accident which hastened his death. Tesla died peacefully in his sleep on Orthodox Christmas Day in 1943. He left behind 300 patents and thousands of sketches, notes, and ideas which are today preserved in the Tesla Museum in Belgrade. In the last days of his life, he said, "A great man is one who collects knowledge as bees collect honey and uses it to help other people find their way out of the difficulties that weigh on them. Hunger, ignorance, disease."
It's very high voltage and we have very important rules. Please move one step behind the fence. Hold the bulb in the button and keep the bulb straight. In every moment you and your bulbs are behind this fence. Never bring your bulbs closer to this transformer. Never do something like this. If you do this, you will be the nearest grounding and lightning could jump out from this part or from this part, hit directly to the bulb. Bad things will happen. Okay. Now you're safe, all of you. Just raise your bulbs a little bit in the air. When I turn on this machine, I produce discharge 3 times. Every time a lightning will be very intense and very loud. Don't worry, don't panic, and please don't drop your bulbs, okay? One very important question before I turn on this machine. Does anybody here in this room have a pacemaker or some device for the heart? Yes, no, not yet. Nobody? Okay. Is everyone ready? lightnings from this sphere. When they bring this bulb closer to the transformer, it lights up. But now when they move this bulb in this position, the bulb couldn't light up because the bulb is out of range of all these electrons produced by electrical discharge. But for example, now when I put my hand on this sphere and when I press this button, I don't feel anything because the current flows directly over the surface of my skin to the ground. If I press my hand, so the lightning of 120,000 volts hit my hand and I'm alive. So it doesn't hurt. What do you think was? Maybe, do you remember, we said here in previous experiment. So we said all Tesla transformers have very high voltage and very high something else. You said frequency. Yes. Very high frequency, and that high frequency is pushing a very low intensity. Okay, now I need few volunteers who want to try lightning. Come closer. Next.
Baba denesene mi?
Yes. Come closer. This small transformer, Tesla main coil, and all Tesla transformers produce electromagnetic waves which we today call signals. I hope that you heard for some types: radio, TV, satellites, Wi-Fi, telecommunication, and the others. Tesla was the first man who used that signals to create the first remote control toy. The replica of that toy is both behind you. Follow me here.
Ben bunu anlamamıştım, hatırlıyor musun? Bunun da arka şeyi böyle sallanıyor.
When he finished this boat 6 years later and presented it at Madison Square Garden in New York before 120 years. But now let's see the main parts of the boat. On my right side, next to you, is remote controller for the boat, but the main parts of this boat are these two antennas, transformers inside the boat, black box inside the boat is battery, mechanism in the rear of the boat, propeller, stern. Let's see now how it really works. Tesla's remote controller had two transformers with different height, with different number of windings of copper wire on primary and on secondary coil. These two transformers produce two different signals with different frequencies and send it to all sides. One part of those signals go here to these antennas, and antennas with different height receive that signal to send to these two transformers inside the boat. Transformers transform voltage to the voltage sufficient to activate this battery, and the battery activates the mechanism in the rear of the boat which drives propeller and the stern. Let's see now how it really works. Please move half a step behind the fence. When I press these two buttons the first time, I send signal for propeller and it starts rotating. Second time, I send signal. One more time. If I press one more time, stern stops. For example, in this position of the stern, the boat will go straight. One more time, the stern. What is interesting, I can stop the stern every moment. So stop here, press it, go back, stop here, go back. Maybe this boat is not so interesting as this male coil, but it's very important to say this boat is the second most important Tesla patent. The first are induction motors. He had more than 300, about 310 patents, so that's a very large number for one scientist. And with this remote control toy, we finish your technical presentation in this museum. In next room are three presentations that follow Tesla's life and work, where you can read more about his life and his inventions. In last room are Tesla's personal belongings, his person's weight, where you can see that he was about 190 centimeters tall. At the end of his life, he had only 64 kilograms. You can see also Tesla's measuring instruments, replica of Tesla's blue portrait. The original blue portrait is located in the town of Hazem in Germany and painted by artist and princess Wilma Voparlagi in early 1916. So that's the only painting that Tesla agreed to post for. All the rest are photos. On the left side of that picture is passage where is the urn with Tesla's ashes. That urn with Tesla's ashes makes this museum in Belgrade the only original and the only authentic Tesla museum in the world.